Good afternoon, Carl Rominger here. 540-0580. Have a legal question, call in, we'll answer it here on the air. That's right, legal question, 540-0580. No cost to you, can't beat it, right? Of course, we don't want to hear names, we don't want to hear specific things like ABC Company, is an evil and vile entity, and it wronged me terribly, and let me go on and on about it. Or Judge Smith is crazy. We like to keep it a little generic because you probably have about 10,000 people listening to you, including probably Judge Smith. So it's probably a good idea to keep that in the back of your head. And I do have to tell you something funny. I was in court the other day, and again, the talk line number is 540-0580. So if you have a legal question, call in with it. But I was in court the other day, and I was arguing a point, and I was advocating for my client, and so I was saying something and taking a legal position, which I believe I could in the circumstance. But the judge said to me, well, you were on the radio the other day saying something along the same lines, but you reached a slightly different result. And I'm thinking maybe what you said on the radio is probably the position I should take. And I'm paraphrasing it, but basically what I was getting was a little throwback of, hey, you want to say that today, and I know why you want to say it today, but the other day on the radio when you were a little less bias and not advocating for somebody and a more neutral, you staked out a slightly different position. I said, I'm going to have to be more careful what I say on the air. It might hurt me later. But no, really, it was just kind of funny to get my own show thrown back in my face. All right, 540-0580. Lan, you're on the air.
Hi, I have a question for you about separation.
Yeah.
If when your spouse leaves the house and they refuse to come back to help clean or anything like that to help get the house ready for selling, is there any repercussions for that when you go to sell the house? Can you use that time as far as getting more money back on the house from the other spouse when it's divided?
Well, when the house is divided, that's part of equitable distribution, and certainly the master or judge who's doing the equitable distribution can consider the relative faults of the parties as well as a pile of other statutory factors. And a person's non-cooperation with the sale of the asset certainly could be held against them, particularly if it reduces the value of the asset. On the other hand, something minor, and I know it doesn't sound minor, but something minor like that, the judge may just say, well, we expect people to be mildly uncooperative in the divorce, so I'm not going to technically hold it against the person. But certainly it could become an issue, and if it's part of a pattern of behavior, it's much more likely to be held against them.
Yeah, this has been going on for several months, and of course I'm putting a lot of time and effort in order to get it up to sell. And
that's something, if I were your attorney, I would be arguing later that, okay, he needs an extra he needs the first $500 off the top for this because he spent this money on, what am I thinking of, Pine Sol and mops and the time he spent to scrub everything to get it ready. Plus he put a fresh coat of paint in the one closet, blah, blah, blah. So seek reimbursement right out of the sale for those things. So certainly it is something your lawyer could advocate for.
Okay, well, thank you very much, sir.
All right, Lan, take care. 540-0580. I don't think, and I hope that the divorce is not turning on $500, though. Otherwise, they probably should have settled already. Dave, you're on the air. Hey, Dave.
Hello?
Yeah, what's going on, brother?
I got a question about inheritance tax slash estate taxes.
Mm-hmm.
I have a distant relative who is actually living in China, and he died, and he inherited his money to me.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, is there, since he's been in China for like years, and I'm wondering if there's an estate slash inheritance tax on that money.
Well, usually the tax is not going to come from this side of the fence. It's going to come from the jurisdiction where the person dies. Usually, we don't in Pennsylvania and the United States. We don't usually tax. We don't usually. Unless I say don't usually. We don't usually tax income from an estate unless tax wasn't paid when it was supposed to be on it. So long and short of it, though, and I don't know how much money we're talking about, but you're probably going to want to talk to a lawyer that handles international estates if you need it. Is there somebody there administrating the estate in China?
Yeah, I have an attorney over there actually handling it for me.
Okay. I would seriously recommend, and I don't know how much money we're talking about, but I would, if it's substantial enough, I would recommend consulting with somebody local. And if you contact me off the air, I'd be happy to refer you to somebody that can help with something like that.
Okay.
Just go to romingerlaw.com, and you can find my email on there, or you can just contact me through the office.
Okay.
All right?
Thanks, Carl.
All right, take care.
Yep.
I think the answer on that is there's probably not going to be any tax, but I would want to defer to somebody that's a little smarter than me. And I happen to know about 800 people that are a little smarter than me, so we'll find one of them to talk to this person. 540-0580. Don, you're on the air.
Hey, Carl, thank you for taking my call. I just had a question about debt collection and bankruptcy. Unfortunately, I'll spare the details, but we may be filing here in a couple months. My question really is, when you stop paying your cards and your loans and everything, in Pennsylvania, I mean, how long does it take till wage garnishment starts, or what has to happen before a company can garnish your wages there?
Okay. To garnish wages in Pennsylvania, the only kind of judgment that a person can garnish wages in Pennsylvania for are landlord-tenant judgments. So employer, your employment money cannot be garnished by a debt to like a credit card, car dealership, things like that. And a lot of national collection agencies, when they write their little script, or the person calls you up and says, "Well, we're going to garnish your wages," nobody gave them the memo that you can't do it in Pennsylvania.
Really?
Yeah.
Because one of the things is we actually have no assets. I mean, we're renting and we're leasing the one car, a secured debt, and the only thing we have just one car. So I mean,
you may not have to do anything. And are you ready? There's been a study done. There's been a study done, and Pennsylvania has a lower bankruptcy rate in the areas at the border versus the immediate other sides of the border with neighboring states where they do allow for collection or garnishment of wages, because that's a tipping point for a lot of people. If you can't get me, if I don't have anything for you to take, and I live in a rented apartment, and I don't have any assets per se, right?
Mm.
The only thing you could reach is my wage in those states. Then you might push me into bankruptcy. But in Pennsylvania, people tend not to choose bankruptcy when they have no assets, because the other side's option is to garnish nothing. Again, unless it's a landlord-tenant matter.
I mean, could they go after a vehicle? I mean, the only thing we have is literally one vehicle.
Yeah, they could go after your vehicle. They could have to execute against the vehicle, and the sheriff would have to sell it. And if the vehicle is not particularly valuable, you're free to bid on it yourself as well, by the way.
I see. Okay, well, interesting. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
All right, Don, go get them.
Thank you.
540-0580. When I get back from the break, I'll take more of your legal questions. Welcome back. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. 540-0580. Whatever you want to talk about, divorce, custody, personal injury, we'll give it a shot. I mean, we don't always know the answer, and if we don't, we'll either refer you to somebody who does, or we'll try to figure out what it is. And, of course, if you want to post a question, go to weekendappointment.com, where you can also download your free will kit. And I'm always doing those. I'm always meeting with you. And what happens is if you go there and get the free will, just go to weekendappointment.com, download the kit, fill it out, send it in. You'll get to meet with me or one of the other lawyers in the office, but usually me, because nobody else wants to do the wills for free except me. And I sit down, meet with you, go over your estate situation a little bit. So it's not like one of these forms you just fill out, or one of these cooked, canned pieces where you can screw up your entire fortune and accidentally leave something to your cat or your dog instead of your kids. This is actually a real live will form where we sit down, we go over things and make sure that a simple will work for you, that it's going to adequately address everything. And most interestingly to me is that quite often, even with the information that people give me, we have a lot of things to discuss about different options and better ways to do things, more careful ways to do things, better ways to adequately take care of whatever issue they particularly want to do. So it makes me think that about half the time when people fill out these will kits and go to the Legal Zooms of the world or places like that, that they're not really getting the forethought and the careful planning that you get when you meet with a real live lawyer. So if you don't want to fill out the free will kit on weekendappointment.com and send it in, just go meet with a lawyer and pay for one somewhere before you do it yourself. I can go on with horror stories about the do-it-yourself wills And I know somebody out there's like, oh, these lawyers, they want you to write a will and they're just going to take your money and blah, 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 blah. Well, sit down with me sometime and I'll give you about five stories I can think of off the top of my head where somebody accidentally, for instance, wrote out some grandkids and accidentally wrote in like a step-grandkid. Now think about that, who got everything because they just didn't understand that the way a will is constructed, the way a court reads the language, is done as if a lawyer had written it. There's no leeway if you write it yourself, so you have to write it like a lawyer would write it. Bill, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger. What's going on? Hey, Bill.
Oh, hello. Thanks for taking my call. Short story, 12 months separated with a child support agreement, and 3 months after starting the child support agreement, laid off work. Was laid off, still laid off. 6 months after that, my unemployment ran out, so I have no income. How do you get the child support changed? Because I haven't been able to make the payments now and have a hearing coming up.
Okay. Well, this is a classic, I don't want to say classic mistake, but people often, quite often, when you realize that you can't make a payment or you're going to have problems making payments, you need to move for a modification immediately. And you have to go into domestic relations or contact domestic relations and say, my income has changed, it's gone down, and I need a modification. Because an enforcement hearing, okay, is much different than a modification hearing. When you show up at the enforcement hearing and say, I can't pay, the judge goes, I don't care if you can pay or not. You were supposed to pay. Now you have to go to jail or get probation or be found in contempt. And clients go in and they want to be able to say, or people go in and want to say, well, I can't pay. And the judge will say, well, if you can't pay, you should have filed a modification. So for you and anybody else listening, the very first thing you should do whenever your income goes down is file the modification immediately. Because worst case scenario is they start an enforcement proceeding and I say, hey, judge, my client filed for a modification right when his income fell. It's been 3 months, but they haven't held the hearing yet, and he is behind, but he may be entitled to a retroactive modification. And the judge goes, oh, okay. Well, why don't we have the modification hearing first and come back? And you see how much difference that makes. So contact domestic relations and get a modification right away.
Is there any free legal assistance since I have no income to really be an attorney anymore? There,
Mid-Penn Legal and some of the other legal services sometimes can provide those kinds of resources, but they don't generally do it for child support. But you could feel free to contact them. They may, and I don't want to preclude you from that. But I would tell you that most likely you're not going to find pro bono help. However, if your income is legitimately no income and you can show job searches, I mean, that's another thing I'm going to look at, right? If I'm the judge or the hearing officer, you show up and say, I don't have any income and here's what's going on. I want to see either that you're disabled and medically disabled and proof of it, or I want to see a thing showing me, where you put all your resumes into. I can think of a guy one time who came in and he had 150 cover letters and resumes that he kept copies of that he was mailing out, over the last couple months. And the hearing officer said, I believe you. You can't get a job. Nobody's hiring. And while we know that nobody's hiring right now, based on the unemployment figures, et cetera, you still have the burden of proof to show that you are out trying to score a job.
Okay, but you can represent yourself if you go to that hearing.
Yeah. And Keith, the other thing to keep in mind, and I'm not telling you this is a problem for you, but there does seem to be a problem in America in general with people who think that every job is beneath them. And so, while everybody complains that illegal immigration and illegal immigrants are stealing all their jobs, up in New York, when they put a job out and said, hey, come on down and pick the apples, they couldn't seem to find any American citizens who wanted to show up and pick the apples because of too much hard labor. And my point on this is that, there's always a McDonald's or a Sheetz or someplace that you might be able to find a job at, even if you think it's beneath you. And that goes a long ways in the court system. Okay?
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. And I don't make that up, man. My mom always used to say that. If there's another job available, you take which one's available. And when I was a kid, I remember being out in the grapes, rained on my head. It would rain, and you stand out there in the rain, and you wished you had a raincoat with you, but that's what you did. So if anybody out there sitting on their hands telling me that there's no work, float down to Adams County or somewhere. I'm sure you can find some of these jobs out there. They're farm labor, they're tough, or you can find some. But I know a lot of people just won't take jobs. I get so mad. They'd be like, well, I can't find anything that fits your what? Your profession, your training, whatever. Get out there and get a job. Now, I also realize that you may not have a physical ability to do certain jobs. And some people are so crazy they might have the mental ability to do some jobs. But that's okay, but we want to see some proof of that as well. 540-0580. Brenda, you're on the air. Hey, Brenda.
Oh, hey. I have a question about you about a grave site.
Okay.
Or for you about a grave site. My father and mother got divorced. My father got remarried. When he passed away, his second wife had a double lot that is in a small area. I mean, there's no space between his and her grave.
Mm-hmm.
She had him buried there, and the marker that she had put on there was the one you get from the vets, the brass plate. And when she passed away, her children buried her next to my father. And when I came back to Pennsylvania, I was living in Florida at the time. When I came back to Pennsylvania to live, I wanted to get a monument for my father's grave.
Mm-hmm.
And I went out there to see, what the size was that I was going to need and stuff like that. And her children had placed a monument to their mother that was 5 foot wide and protrudes over on my father's gravesite.
Okay.
Do I have any right to ask them to move it so that I can put a marker on his grave? Because the grave sites originally belonged to her.
Well, I guess it's his grave now, right? But I don't know who it belongs to. I don't know. The short answer is I don't know the answer to that, whether you have a legal right to move that or not. Have you tried discussing it with them?
They don't want to talk to me about it.
Okay. And let me ask it this way. Were they happily married?
I don't think so. My father, when my mother and father got divorced, it was because he was a major alcoholic, and he had a really good retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a woman who didn't have anything, so they met in a bar and they got married, and they were only married for a little over a year
Before he passed.
Before he passed.
Well, let me ask it this way: you don't know if he would care or not, do you?
Well, what do you mean if he would care?
I mean, would he care? I think that to me that would be the first question. If I thought he didn't care, if I thought one of my dead relatives wouldn't be upset about it, then I wouldn't get upset about it.
Well, the thing that
it's not a legal answer. I'm just kind of asking you that to think it through from a practical standpoint, whether we even want to make an issue out of it.
Let me put it to you this way. His dream all his life was to be buried in Indiantown Gap.
Right.
And he was eligible. But she refused to do that.
Okay, so he might not be happy where he's at.
No, he's not happy.
All right. Well, then in that respect, the short answer is I don't know if I'm just trying to figure this out because this is something I've never had to think about before. Mm-hmm. So they own a little deeded plot in the cemetery, and they're really her deeds, right?
Right.
But what happens to those deeds once you're buried? I think the land gets dedicated to the cemetery, I think.
Uh-huh.
So I'm guessing that nobody really owns those plots anymore, but they belong to the cemetery.
Okay.
But it would certainly seem that it would be his plot and he would have certain rights. So I think maybe you could argue that the stone or the monument shouldn't protrude onto his.
Uh-huh.
But then again, I'm not sure that fight's worth the effort. Because, even if you get it moved over, he's still not going to be happy where he is.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So, I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right, Brenda, that's kind of my thought on the matter is you might be able to say that. I'm just thinking it through in broad strokes, and maybe there's somebody out there who's owns a cemetery or a mortician who might have a better insight on that. But from a practical standpoint, I'm not sure it's a fight you want to dust up. I just talking to another lawyer who has a fight going on between a client and another person, a family member. They're fighting over some silly thing, and nobody's happy, and everybody's spending money. The only people that are happy are the lawyers. And I know nobody believes us when we say we don't want to see people spending money unnecessarily, but as a general rule, we don't, because here's what happens. At the end of the day, everybody wants to spend money. Everybody loves to spend their money unnecessarily until the end, right? And then when nothing great happens, when the sun doesn't shine magically brighter and the rain doesn't stop falling and the cold weather doesn't go away, when the lawsuit's over, they go, Why'd I spend all that money? And then who do they blame? And that's why we poor lawyers a lot of times would prefer people shy away. But early on, they never believe us.
Well, I do understand what you're saying.
So, but Brenda, you know what? The answer is if you thought it would make them happy, maybe it's something you would want to pursue. But if you're telling me it's not going to matter at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know.
I don't know if it would. I don't think it would really make him happy because where he wanted to be, he's not. Right,
and so I mean, and that's the only other thing you could do. I mean, maybe you could find out about an exhumation and reburial at Indiantown Gap.
Now that's very costly.
Yeah, and I was going to say that would be very costly.
Mm-hmm. And we're not a rich family.
Understand. Well, at least you know. At least you know where he is, and you know where to talk to him. Okay.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right, hon.
Well, thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Bye.
540-0580. When we get back from the break, we'll keep mumbling about legal problems here. Carl Rominger here, answering your legal questions, 540-0580. And let's see here, who's next? Keith, you're on the air. Hey, Keith.
Hello. Hi, Carl. I have a problem with some sloppy collection agencies.
Okay.
I've been called over the past 10 years, sometimes as often as once or twice a month, about delinquent payments. And it just happens that I have a name that's similar to somebody who's defaulted on these loans, and I myself have no outstanding debts. I pretty much, if you tell them that it's not you, they'll take you off their list. But there must be a gazillion of those collection agencies out there.
Oh yeah.
Pretty soon I'm going to be moving, and I'll have another phone number, and it'll get into their computer banks, and they'll probably be calling me again. Is there any way I can avoid this, or anything I can do to stop them? And
you're saying you don't legitimately owe anybody any money that they're calling about, right?
That's correct. And I know I'm not the only person that this has happened to.
I think under the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act, if you don't owe them any money, you would have and you've told them previously not to call you. If the same people call you again, you would have the right to sue them.
Fair Debt Collection. I'm sorry. What was the name?
Fair Debt Collections Practices Act.
Okay, thank you.
Google that, and you'll be able to find enough information to make you dangerous.
Okay.
All right, brother?
Thank you very much, Carl.
All right, go get them. 540-0580. That's what we like to do sometimes. We just hand you the book, tell you to read it over, and go to court and see what you can come up with. Works. All right, I've got Drew Deo on the line. Hey, Drew, what's going on?
Hey, how are you, Carl?
Good. For people that didn't know you, Drew, you practice in the office with me. You're one of the associates of Rominger and Associates. What, you got anything exciting going on you want to tell us about?
Let's see here. Always got a lot going on. This past week, I filed an appeal or an allowance for an appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court it was a DUI case. And it happened quite a while ago now. We've sort of gone all the way up through. And I originally appealed the decision to the Pennsylvania Superior Court, but the issue in that case was the admissibility of the BAC level based on test results performed at the police station. And they do that, usually one of two ways, with either blood work or at the hospital or an actual intoxilizer machine at the police station.
Okay.
But the issue in our case was to get that BAC admitted into evidence, you need to lay a foundation. What machine was this performed on? How do we even know it was working? So you need calibration and maintenance logs saying that this equipment is essentially in proper working order, whereas they had those logs, but they didn't have the individual that actually calibrated these machines and performed these tests. So our argument is that to admit that calibration log without the individual who actually did the calibrating would be a violation of the defendant's Sixth Amendment right to confront that witness. And that's based on a sort of recent Supreme Court case, Melendez-Diaz. So that's sort of a unique legal issue that I have going on right now. That we just filed, like I said, to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court on that issue here this past week.
And I suspect, I guess the idea is that the accuracy or the ability to confront the person to make sure they did their job right and did it properly and didn't just write down a number is the purpose here.
Right, exactly. And if they didn't do it right, or they did just write down a number, how would we really know if they weren't required to come into court and testify to, yeah, this is what I did, this is the way I calibrated this, and I'm trained to do that? How do we really know if it's just a signature on the paper?
Right. And I can tell you, and I know a lot of people out there go, oh, you guys are technicalities trying to let these criminals go free. But Melendez-Diaz was a Supreme Court case that followed another one called the Crawford case, which were authored by none other than Anton Scalia, the very conservative, Republican-friendly judge of the United States Supreme Court, who said that the Constitution requires confrontation under the Sixth Amendment, and making things convenient for police and prosecutors was not the issue, and that cost was not the issue. Honoring the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution was the issue, and the crucible of cross-examination. Am I paraphrasing that right?
I think you are, and that's exactly sort of the argument that we're making. Now, there is some language in Melendez where they said not every declaration would need a witness to come in and testify to, but anything of an affidavit of that nature, if it's testimonial in nature, then it would require the witness to be there.
And
now, the trial court in our case held that the person who calibrated these machines did not need to be there to testify, and of course that's what we're objecting.
And I guess the Superior Court gave a published opinion, meaning that it's an interesting enough question that they were willing to actually publish it and answer it. Of course, they answered it the wrong way from your purposes.
Yes, and I think really what they were saying is they didn't want to go as far as to extend Melendez to calibration laws and things like that. And I think maybe their fear is that we're going to be, essentially in a speeding ticket case, hey, who calibrated this radar machine? We want that witness in here. And that's not essentially what we're saying, but I think that's what they're afraid of.
Well, your boss said that not too long ago in a speeding ticket case and resolved it because the Commonwealth didn't want to make an issue out of it. So, anyhow, all right, we're going to take some calls. 540-0580. Mike, you're on with Carl and Drew.
I have a question for you. Did you get your deer?
I got a Maryland deer so far.
Oh, what's a Maryland deer? A deer in Maryland, right?
A deer in Maryland. That's right. It's a Maryland. It's a citizen of another state.
I thought you went to New York.
Well, New York was. Listen, New York was fun. I saw a lot of nice wildlife. I actually watched two otters playing in a swamp for about an hour, which is a rare sight. Although they're reestablishing up there now. But the deer and I just didn't seem to. Well, let me put it this way. They were all speed dates. All the deer I saw were moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Oh, were they really? Well, at least you got one in Maryland.
I did.
Do you go in Pennsylvania at all?
I was out on an island in the river with president of the Susquehanna Valley Outfitters, the Stony Creek Outfitters, Brent Shickley, and his brother, Adam, who's probably the greatest hunter. Adam Shickley's probably the greatest hunter in the history of Pennsylvania, managed to bag a buck, and that was it.
Oh, well, good. Well, at least one of you got one. I had a question.
Yes.
I watched your video on your website, but I didn't have audio where I was.
And the audio on it's kind of sketchy anyhow.
I know it was a little while back, and I knew they didn't charge you with the DUI, but according to what I was reading, you did plead guilty to something. Am I correct?
I pled guilty to. Well, they let me put it this way. I pled guilty as a matter of convenience. They charged me with going 20 miles over the speed limit, and I pled guilty to a 3111, which is failure to obey a traffic control device, no points, non-moving violation.
Oh, okay. Well, I saw it was some number you pled guilty. I didn't know if it was going over the white line or...
Yeah, no. He claimed I was going 20 miles over the speed limit, and when he first gets out there and I say, well, I was behind two other cars, he says there were no cars in front of you, but if you watch the beginning of the video, it's amazing. There's two cars in front of me.
Yeah. How long did he have you pulled over? It seemed like forever.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they do that all the time. But
right. And trust me, that's and what happens once you invoke your rights, I always joke about this, once you invoke your rights, the number of police officers on scene starts to multiply.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend that's a cop for like 25 years. He's a pretty straight guy. And I asked him about invoking your rights, and he said, you can do that legally, but the whole demeanor of the cops is going to completely change.
I agree 100% with that.
So you got to be leery of that even if you're innocent. I don't go down that road anyhow. I mean, I might have a couple of drinks, but I don't, I don't need that hassle in my life.
I didn't have enough alcohol in me that night, too, and I wouldn't drive with a lot of alcohol in me. I want to make sure I'm clear about that because otherwise my Facebook's going to light up with, what, Carl, you... But my point on it is, though, is I had 2 thimbles of whiskey at the Red Lobster. You know how they literally pour it out the little dinger there?
Oh, yeah.
So, and I had those with dinner at like 5 o'clock. Now, mind you, I'm pulled over at midnight. And I had 1 glass of red wine at the now defunct Scott's in downtown Harrisburg. And I get it in my brilliant brain that I'm going to drive out to Fort Hunter out there to the boat launch to see if they're catching any catfish. and
haven't made that trip again, right?
And it just sort of and the thing was, the car is not my car, so it's not registered to me. So when they ran the plate, they didn't see it coming back to me.
Oh, I see.
So they didn't know what's going on. I mean, in other words, they didn't know, and not that they would know immediately that I'm a lawyer, but I have noticed a few times when I'm pulled over, by the time the police officer gets up to the car, because they're all Durgan listeners, they know who I am. So it's sort of like they know they're dealing with a lawyer, and not that I get any special treatment. I usually get beat with a billy club. But my point is just that I don't think he knew he was dealing with a lawyer. So when he started in with the usual routine of, and listen, here's the question: where are you coming from? What am I supposed to say? Scott's? Oh, that's a bar. There's some probable cause. Have you been drinking? Well, hey, and I was pulled over in Virginia. I haven't had a chance to tell you guys this, so let me answer this one for you, Mike. I'm pulled over in Virginia speeding the other day, okay? And I'm going 84 and a 70. And the guy pulls me over and says, do you realize in Virginia that for more than 10 miles over is reckless driving? That's a very serious offense. I was like, no, officer, I did not realize that. He's like, and he's like, did you have your seatbelt on earlier, or did you just put that on?
I did ask you that.
and I'm laughing because I'm like, well, if I had just put it on, you think I'm going to say that? But no, I had it on because I usually drive with a seatbelt. Because when you do car accident work like I do, and you start looking at the results of not wearing a seatbelt, and I never wore a seatbelt until I became a lawyer and started working in a law firm, and we did a lot of insurance defense work and plaintiffs work and auto accidents. And I started reading all the studies, and you realize seatbelt's a really smart thing to have on.
Oh, yeah, I think most people came around, and there's a few people don't anymore.
But what made me laugh was the question of, did you have your seatbelt on before? Like, and I can imagine some of my clients going, no, I didn't. I just put it on because, I saw you coming up to the car, and I felt bad I didn't have it on. But no, I didn't. And then you're going to get another ticket. Why would you ever answer that question?
And that's sort of along the line. I have one right now, not to jump in, but the whole issue where the person's intoxicated and the police roll up and they're not even in the vehicle, and the cops start questioning, and it's through the statements and the admissions that then they can get that probable cause to place them in the vehicle, at a point that they were intoxicated.
Yeah.
I just know their whole demeanor changed. You're probably right.
Oh.
10 other cops are going to be there within 5 minutes.
And that's the dealio. I mean, let's be honest here, right? If you're pulled over, somebody's pulled you over, like that officer in Virginia, I was very friendly, and I wasn't invoking anything. When I got pulled over, going up there, Susquehanna Township Police, I know why they pulled me over. It's the time of night. They're fishing for a DUI. And there was one other time I got pulled over by a state trooper when I didn't do anything wrong, and I was sure of it. And he came up to the car and said something to me, and I just full bore let into him with a line of expletives, which I would have loved to have had the tape for. and he looked right at me, and he knew right then and there I was calling him out on it. And he was fishing because I came out of a bar. And the funny part about it was I was writing a brief. It's midnight. I decided to swing up to the Trindle Inn in Carlisle to have a beer. I literally got there, walked in the door. There was nobody there that I knew. And I was like, you know what? I'm going home, going to bed. I don't feel like having one now anyhow. And so I know I hadn't drank because I've been writing a brief from 5 p.m. until midnight. And I hadn't even had dinner. and at that point, I just, I was like, just go get something to eat and go to bed. And so I knew I had nothing. I pulled out of there. I stopped at the stop sign. I saw him sitting up there, had my blinker on, took my right, and here come the lights. And you know what's funny about it is I knew which trooper it was going to be because there was a certain trooper who was fishing out there for DUIs all the time, and he had no probable cause, and he was going to lie about it later, and I knew it.
I was going to say, they're supposed to have probable cause, but your word against the cops.
Yeah, except that I knew that nothing was wrong with me, and he wasn't going to be able to haul me in because I wasn't screwed up. So, all right, I got to go to break.
Okay.
Mike, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Carl Rominger here, 540-0580, answering your legal questions. Got Drew Deo here with me as well. Sometimes if you call in, I'm not available. Obviously, Drew might be, and Drew's a pretty smart attorney. Drew, what were you the editor of? I forget.
I was the editor of the Arbitration and Mediation Journal at Dickinson School of Law, which sort of covered all areas of alternative dispute resolution, which is mediation, arbitration, handling cases essentially outside of the court system. But I had the opportunity to be the editor of that journal, which is interesting because it's really the only professional journal that the Dickinson School of Law has. And it's actually sold. It's sort of a journal for lawyers.
Right.
So it was a unique opportunity to be a part of that, and I certainly enjoyed that.
They didn't let me do anything like that when I was in law school for some reason. I wasn't allowed near anything important. I don't know why. 540-0580. Malcolm, you're on with Carl and Drew.
Hello, Carl. I have a real estate question for you.
Yes.
My brother and I are co-owners on a property. We acquired the property in 2008 through estate planning with my parents.
Okay.
Since that time, I have been paying all the expenses, taxes, insurance, everything on the house.
Mm-hmm.
I've been keeping, of course, documentation on what my brother would owe me for what I've been paying, and it's come to a substantial amount. My brother came to me and said that he was willing to sign off on the property and give everything to me on that property if I were to give him X number of dollars, a substantial amount, and write off his debt. So I gave it some consideration, and I decided to do it. But my question is this. I am not married. My brother is married. In order for us to make that transaction, since his wife is the heir to the property, should he die, must she get involved in this, or is it only between my brother and I?
It's generally just between your brother and you. However, I would want to see her sign the deed. And the reason I would want to see her sign the deed is because she arguably has a spousal interest in anything he owns. And so to clarify the title and to keep it clean, we would want that. Now, there's some authority that's maybe not necessary, and there's some authority that you don't actually need her signature unless they're in a divorce.
No, they're not in a divorce, no.
But to be 100% safe, because there are a lot of lawyers who would not consider that title clean, and that could create a problem for you or your heirs down the road. So we would want to get her signature while the getting's good. I would assume is he trying to keep his wife to not know what's going on?
No, I can't answer that. All I know is once it got to the point where he needed that signature, then of course everything dropped. It's just stopped.
Right.
He was told he needed that signature. And what I can't understand is if my parents were still living and we were the heirs of the property when they died, would we have to sign off on that just like a wife would have to sign?
No. Spousal interest is different.
Oh, it's different. Okay.
And the other thing I would tell you, though, is you have another right called partition. And under the partition action, you would have the right to divide up the property and charge him for costs and fees and things like that, and things that he didn't pay, like the taxes.
Okay.
So long and short of it is you do have the ability to force a sale of that property or literally to have it divided between the two of you.
Okay.
So that's an option as well.
Okay. Well, I may stop up and talk to you about that someday.
All right. I've done them before.
Okay. Very good.
All right, Malcolm. Take care.
All right.
540-0580. Carl Rominger answering your legal questions. We're going to go to break here in a minute, but as you know, we have 2 full hours of live legal discussions here, and we're joined by Drew Deo. Alan, you're on the air. Alan.
Hello, Carl. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. I had a question about a will.
Uh-huh.
My wife's father died a couple months ago. Before he died, he was saying that he wanted us to read the will. He is remarried. The stepmother, we assume, is the executor of the estate.
Okay.
Okay. Right after he died, she said, I don't know where the will is. It's gone. So the question is, does somebody have a copy? Can we retrieve a copy? Or, how does that work? If she decides not to even come forth with it, that's the way it goes?
The short answer is you got to figure out where that will is or who wrote it. Do you know what attorney your father would usually have used?
We do.
Then usually you go to the attorney and say, hey, Dad passed. new stepmom saying she doesn't know where the will is, and you can probate a photocopy of it.
Right. My wife did call the lawyer, and he pretended like he didn't know anything about it, and said if she doesn't come forward with it, then that's the way it is.
Well, you might need another lawyer to talk to the other lawyer.
Okay. I mean, like, there was not even a thing that, I mean, who can you apply to be an executor of the state?
Well, the executor is a term of art, meaning you are named in the will. If you want to administrate it as you become an administrator, if you're not named in the will for somebody who dies intestate or without a will. So long and short of it is she'd be the natural person, but you'd have the ability to challenge that. Particularly, you also have the ability to sue her and basically say you're hiding the will and you're not coming forward with the will.
Right.
Of course, we don't know what the will says, right? Or we do know.
No, we don't know what.
Because the will might just say it leaves everything to her. Now, the other thing, though, is as the biological children, you may have a right to take against the will, I believe, vis-a-vis the stepmom, but that gets a little complicated. But I'm just thinking out loud there.
Right.
All right, my friend? Got to go.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
All right, I'll be here for another hour. Another full hour answering your legal questions. That's right, Shannon. It's not that far along, are we? 540-0580. Just call in. We'll answer them in the next hour. In the meantime, just go to RomingerLaw.com if you want to learn more about us, or call the office, 241-6070.